Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. I'm Callie, and today I am going to be my June wrap up. In the month of June, I read 20 books, which I think that's my record right now. I don't know how I read this many books, but I did. So I'm gonna just jump right into it. I'm actually gonna structure these a little differently. I've watched a lot of BookTube, and I have found that I am way more interested in the wrap-ups and recent reads if the creator does it by star value. So I'm gonna start off with the books that I gave the lowest star and end on, of course, a high note with the books that I really enjoyed in the month of June. So without further ado, I'm gonna start with my 2 to 2.5 star range, and the first book for that is Ink in the Blood by Kim Smejkal. I gave this 2.5 stars. I really liked the concept. So this story revolved around a magic system with tattooing. So these two girls who are best friends are what are called inklings, and they have this magic to give people tattoos to kind of direct them in life. And the inklings are run by this congregation, and there's this really big lore about how the tattoo magic came to be. Our main character, Cecilia, and her best friend hate being inklings. Basically, they had to be given, a tattoo showed up on them when they were younger, so their parents were forced to give them up to this congregation without any choice. And they hate what they've become, what they're doing to people. So they run away basically with a circus. Or like this traveling circus, and they meet these people. They have to hide the fact that they're inklings. It had so much potential, and I don't know if it's maybe I didn't mesh with the writing style, but the pacing was all over the place. The plot was honestly kind of hard to understand. I liked a lot more of the background information a lot better while reading this, but I found myself having a really hard time figuring out the plot line and where the story was going. And I think that this story had that issue that I have found with authors I don't particularly like, where they're telling you what's happening opposed to showing you. So I found that there is a distinct difference as I read more and more, that the difference between telling and showing is huge, and I find that I'm able to immerse myself a lot more when I'm being shown the world opposed to being told, which I know it's kind of like a hard thing to like, even as I'm saying it, it sounds like a really weird thing, but it does make a difference to me. So unfortunately, I didn't really care for this one. The next book in this category is Envy by Anna Godberson. This is book 3 in the Lux series, which this is a series following basically Gossip Girl in 1900. And the main issue that I constantly keep having with this story is there is no story. It's just following a bunch of teenagers. And I know, like, I haven't given any of these books in this series higher than like a 2 or a 3, but I've never ended up liking any of them, which is really upsetting and sad. But I am finishing up the 4th book soon. I don't know, this had the same issue. There was no plot. It was all rumors and things that could happen, and no one talking about their feelings, and that whole trope. I am interested to see where this is going, kind of. I don't really know. I say that at the end of each book, they ended on a really good cliffhanger, and then like nothing happens. They just sort of explain it away within the first 5 pages and then call it a day. So I don't know why I expect more from the final book, but I kind of do. And the last one in this category is Mortal Gods by Kendare Blake. This is book 2 in the Anti-Goddess or the Goddess War trilogy. So we're following the Grecian gods in modern day, but they're slowly dying, and in the most gruesome, weird manners. So similar to Ink in the Blood, this story has so much weird pacing. It's like, I have to jump on a plane to Indonesia, I'll see you tomorrow, and like, that's not how that works. So the pacing is really all over the place. There is a ton of plot holes, like just an enormous amount of plot holes that are so aggravating to me. And honestly, I think the biggest issues in this for me is the characters. I don't give a flying crap about any of the gods or goddesses. They're not humanized at all. They are that crummy, I'm a god and I'm better than you complex, or reincarnated people or awoke people from history are that they're all very much woe is me, and I don't care for that in these characters when they're based off of these strong historical figures like Achilles and Hector of Troy and Cassandra the Seer, and it's just, there's so much potential because I love a good Grecian god story, and this had so much potential to be really unique. And honestly, it's, again, the issue I had with the first book was it was so gruesome for no reason, and I hated that. So, and this just continued that trend. So moving on to the 3-star range, I have a few more books to talk about with that one. The first one being The Towering Sky by Katherine McGee. This is the final book in the 1000th Floor series, which was a futuristic telling of Gossip Girl. So we're following a bunch of these teenagers in this almost utopian society where all of New York is basically in this single tower. With this series, I think overall I'd give the entire series a 3-star. It was fine, but it was filled with every single trashy, and I mean trashy in the nicest of ways, trashy YA trope ever. This is really shiny. And I didn't really care for that because it made the story extremely predictable. I predicted the ending to this, I think, in book 1, and I was right. And along with that, this had not at all a satisfying ending. Honestly, the ties were not knotted in nice little bows. They weren't even attempted to being knotted. So nothing was really resolved, if that makes any sense. So we spent 3 books not doing much. And that was kind of a bummer for me. I don't know. I think definitely after reading this series and the Lux series, the Gossip Girl retellings, Gossip Girl-esque stuff is definitely not my style. The next book that I gave 3 stars this month is Spindle Fire by Lexa Hillyer. This is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, which is one of those stories that I don't think gets retold enough. I really love the original story of Sleeping Beauty, even the Grimm's fairy tale version. I think it is very dark and twisted and has so much potential. I love the Disney version of it. I love Maleficent. I live for Sleeping Beauty retellings. I think there needs to be more. This, however, follows Aurora and her sister. So I really like how we've added a sister element to this story. I really enjoyed both of those characters. However, this had such flowery writing, and I don't think flowery writing is really my style. It honestly does kind of depend, because I did like The Night Circus, and that one had really flowery writing, but this, a lot of it didn't make sense, at least to me. I don't know. I did really like the Fae system. So the big thing with this is it was the Fae bestowing these gifts. So Aurora is actually a mute and she can't feel touch, but because of that, she was given the beauty and the grace that we know from the movies. And her sister is blind. So we get these different gifts, but there is something that has to be given up. And I really liked that give and take, because Fae, I feel like in a lot of the movies or shows that get this Disneyification, they forget that Fae are known to be these tricksters. So they'll give you something really nice, but you have to give something back. And this got that very, very well. This almost felt like a Frozen meets Sleeping Beauty with the sister aspects, and I really, really liked that. It's just the flowery writing, and it was extremely predictable. There was a lot of things that were different, but a lot of things I was like, oh, okay, this is the direction we're going. This is what's going to happen, and sure enough, that's what happened. I am really interested to see where Winter Glass goes, which is the sequel, because this is actually a duology, so very excited to see where that goes. The next book that I gave 3 stars was actually our June Serpent and Badger Book Club book, which, that's a mouthful, and that was The Wedding Date by Jason Guillory. I gave this 3 stars. So this book, we follow two main characters, a guy and a girl. They have this really cute meet cute moment in an elevator, and he ends up asking her to be his +1 at his ex-girlfriend's wedding. She says yes, and our relationship kind of ensues. So I think that this had a really fun setup. I really enjoyed the meet cute. The characters were really well done. I really enjoyed their chemistry and what they were able to bring to the table. However, a couple of the issues that I had was this had the biggest and most annoying trope in any contemporary romance story, and that is miscommunication. Dear God, just people need to talk to each other. And that was my like biggest qualm in this book. It was extremely predictable, but I found that a lot of romances, that's what they are. They're predictable. I knew what was gonna happen. Another issue is Drew, our main guy. I felt like his backstory wasn't very strong, where Alexa is this badass girl trying to make it in the world as a Black woman in politics, and I loved exploring that aspect. It was so much fun, and I almost kind of dreaded Drew's parts because he didn't bring a ton to the table, and I don't know, I just feel like he could have had more of a story, whereas he was just sort of that stereotypical white guy who dated a bunch of people and couldn't commit, which I feel like that's such a that's such a basic thing to do with a guy character. Oh, I mean, I enjoyed it. It was cute. The romance-y slash smutty scenes were not great. When I go into a romance, this did not deliver that on me. I felt that the smut was really weak and didn't bring enough to the table to make up for its other faults. Funny enough, another 3-star that I had is another romance that I read, and that is the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa K. Adams. This is actually Brittany's book. She recommended this to me. I gave this 3 stars. So this intrigued me because it was a romance, but different. We're following a guy who is trying to save his marriage by reading romance novels, and he is introduced to this by a bunch of his guy friends who decide that he needs their help. I thought that the concept was extremely well done. I loved the aspects that the Bromance Book Club brought to the table. This was not a typical romance. I actually couldn't really predict what was happening, and I really enjoyed that. However, again, same with The Wedding Date, not great smut. Like, they were having marital problems. We didn't get a lot of smut. I'm a little unhappy about it. But at the same time, I kind of get it. I hated one of the characters in this. So the sister of the wife is so unsupportive and just overall aggravating, and to the point aggravating, she kind of ruined the story for me, which is so not cool. Like, honestly, every time she opened her mouth, I wanted to throw the book across the room. She was just she was an adult throwing a hissy fit because her sister was thinking about fixing her marriage. Let that sink in. Like, that, what kind of sibling does that? It was ridiculous. So, 3 stars. Brittany's trying to convince me to read the sequel, but the sequel follows that sister, and I'm not super convinced yet. So, the final 2 books for 3 stars are actually a series. I think it's going to end up being a longer series than the 2 books. One was a reread, and that was The Mermaid Trials by Cameron Drake. I recently learned that this had a sequel come out, which was The Mermaid Academy, and I really wanted to pick both of them up since it had been a hot minute since I read The Mermaid Trials. So during my reread of The Mermaid Trials, I ended up lowering my score from a 4 to a 3. I think I ended up giving this a 4 just for the fact that this was one of the first mermaid books that I picked up after I started reading again, and I just was devouring anything with the mermaids. However, the story's all over the place. The characters don't have a ton of depth. It's very insta-lovey. I do really enjoy this. I am definitely keeping this book, and I really enjoy this series. I think this is just a strict enjoyment factor read. It's not greatly written. It's not a great plot, but it's so unique. It's Cinderella type mermaid character meets the Hunger Games, and it's just so cool and a unique place, and I really liked the atmosphere. So naturally, I picked up The Mermaid Academy, which I also gave 3 stars. Honestly, it needed to be longer. Like, look at them. It needed to be longer, and especially with how this book ended, I needed more. I think that this needed to be longer just because I wanted to see our old characters, whereas this focused a lot more on our political intrigue and the relationships between our main 2 characters, which is fine, but I just wanted more. So I only have 1 book for 3.5 stars, and that is another reread, and that is One Dark Throne by Kendare Blake. This is book 2 in the 3 Dark Crowns series. So in the 3 Dark Crowns series, we're following 3 sisters who have to kill each other for the throne of this magical island when they are 16. I think that this one just has the most plot building, where this is just all set up. We got the introduction and the world building in book 1, which was so unique and dark and creepy, and this one is building to our bigger plot that comes in the next 2 books, because I think the 3rd book is my favorite in the entire series because things actually start to happen and we get a lot more of the lore in book 3, and then we have our grand finale in book 4. So this one I just think I will reevaluate when I finish the whole series, but I think this one is probably the weakest of all 4 books. Moving on to my 4 stars. So for my 4 stars, I'm going to start off with The Missing of Claire de Lune by Christelle Dabos. This is book 2 in the Mirror Visitor series, which is actually a series that is translated from French. And no, it is not the only reason that I like that. But this story is just extremely unique. It has such depth. Our characters have that depth. They have rich backstories, and the history and the lore of this world is so unique and different, and I loved it. And it takes such a unique turn in this book. I am so ready. The 3rd book comes out in English later this year, and you best believe I am picking it up immediately because that twist, and we found out who our villain is, and it is the most weird and awesome villain. I am so excited to explore this further. The next book that is 4 stars is City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I probably butchered that, but I'm sorry. This is almost a retelling of 1001 Arabian Nights. There's a lot of aspects of Aladdin, and I really liked this. This book, as much as I really liked it and gave it 4 stars, I think I gave it 4 stars solely because of the atmosphere and the enjoyment factor. The plot kind of starts very, very late in the book. So we're following Hillyer, who finds out that she is actually part jinn. And she is taken away by this 1,000-year-old jinn warrior who is just this grumpy man, who I love that character, and taken to Daybabad, which is basically the city of the jinn. And she has to figure out how to own her powers and figure out her place in this society, which is in such turmoil. There is a lot of class wars going on between the jinn, the deva, and the shavit. And it was just the political system, the atmosphere, and the world itself was so beautifully written. And that was the main aspect of why I loved this book so much. And I'm really excited to get into the next 2. Now at the end of the last 150 pages was really where we're starting to understand where our plot is going. And I'm really excited to get more of the plot. Also more of the history and the background, because the lore and history is so rich and unique. And we have these super morally gray characters, which I am so in love with, because we have basically a Prince Ali who is trying to fight for who he thinks is the lowest class, but at the same time he's also betraying his family while doing so, and there's so much just turmoil, and I love it. I love a good turmoil. The next 4-star read that I have is Gathering Darkness by Morgan Rhodes. This is the 3rd book in the Fallen Kingdoms series, which I am just loving. If you don't know anything about this series, obviously I can't tell you what happens in this one. Best way I can describe it is Game of Thrones. This is a YA version of Game of Thrones, and I'm living for it because there is so much happening, but I don't feel overwhelmed by the world, the magic, the history. All of it is so perfectly woven, and I am loving every single second. I am loving our characters. Honestly, the only issue that I have with any of these books is all of the love interests are insta-love, but the romance aspect is so low on the totem pole of plot points that I kind of don't care. But that's really my biggest thing, is the insta-love. I have so many feelings with this ending, and I'm so scared as to where this series is going, because this series is 6 books long and I'm only halfway through it. So many things are going to happen, so many more bad things, and bad things have already been happening. Our author is not afraid to kill off characters like Game of Thrones, and I'm here for it every second. And the last 4-star read that I have is Darkdawn by Jay Kristoff, which is the final book in the Nevernight Chronicles. This book was chock full of answers, and that's honestly what I needed out of this book. I do still think Godsgrave is my favorite, just because we get that badassery, we get these fights, we get so many great things that I wanted in God's Grave. This book is more full of answers and history, which I still really, really appreciated and really liked. But this one just didn't stick with me as much as God's Grave. I did really like this finale. I think this is a perfect finale when it comes to giving me what I want at the end of a series, because I did really love Mia and Ashlyn and all of these characters, and I'm really pleased with how this ended. I'm not happy with it, but I understand and I'm pleased. For my 4.5 stars, I have one book, and that is Bonecryer's Moon by Katherine Purdie. I am so in love with this story, it's not even funny. In this story, we follow our two main characters, Elise and Bastian. Elise is trying to become a full-blown bone crier, which means she wants to ferry the dead to either heaven or hell. And in order to become a fully fledged bone crier, you have to lure and kill your soulmate. And when Elise is doing that ceremony, Bastian shows up, and Bastian's whole goal in life is to lure and kill a bone crier because he watched one kill his father. This is just an amazing hate-to-love romance that was so much fun. The bone criers aspect, they use the bones of the things that they've killed, the animals that they've killed, that gives them powers. In the very beginning of this book, Elise captures a tiger shark and takes its bones for its speed and dexterity in water, as well as night vision. And there's so many more. We learn so many other animals and what gifts they give to each of the bone criers, and it is so unique. And then Bastian, who is a great angsty character, just out for revenge because of watching his father getting taken from him. And I love their relationship. They end up weirdly kind of capturing each other, and then the history and the secrets and all of that around the bone criers starts to get revealed piece by piece. And then we have Sabine, is Elise's best friend, who is basically puts it upon herself to rescue her. And Sabine is just my beautiful little cinnamon roll that I am so in love with her character, and her character development within this story is phenomenal. And I'm so ready to see what Sabine and Elise and Bastian will get up to in the next book. So moving on to my 5-star reads, I actually have 4 of them, which is very impressive. However, 3 of them are rereads, and 3 of them are also a part of the exact same series. It's this one. So I reread the A Court of Thorns and Roses series this month. I only really meant to read book 1, but obviously that didn't happen. I read all 3, and I gave all 3 5 stars. This is by far one of my favorite series. I love everything about this series. It has everything. It has romance, it has redemption, it has revenge, it has a beautiful and rich world. The characters have depth and beautiful backstories. And the characters, like, they talk about their feelings, but at the same time that they have, like, bad things going on. So it is a phenomenal story. I love A Court of Thorns and Roses. If you don't already know, it is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it is also so much more. So I talk enough about A Court of Thorns and Roses. I even started getting more merch because I needed more merch. I talk about it a lot on this channel. I will not do it some more. So the last book that I gave 5 stars is The Skyweaver by Kristen Ciccarelli. This is the final book in the Ascari series, which has slowly become one of my favorite series. Each book follows a different girl in this world, and this world is filled with such political intrigue and dragons and betrayals, searches for revenge, a unique magic system, and this one did not disappoint. We're following a pirate and our captain of the guard from books 1 and 2, and I loved every single second of it. And this, as much as it did focus on those 2 girls, we're also following a singular plotline through all 3 books, and it wrapped up beautifully, and it had such a unique wrap up that I was not expecting at all. This book had so many twists and turns, and I loved every second of it, so I highly, highly recommend this series. It is a wild ride from book 1 to page 1 of book 1 to the last page of this one. Highly recommend it. Can't even recommend it enough. Just go read this series. It's great. So those are all of the books that I ended up reading in the month of June. I read a ton, I'm hoping to keep up that momentum. I don't think I'll be able to get 20 books in July. That's just so outrageous that I read that many. But feel free to check out any of our links down below in the description. We have a lot of good stuff down there. And feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And I will see you guys in our next video. Bye!